The divine is not something high above us. It is in heaven, it is in earth, it is in you, and it is in everything. The Gospel of Thomas. This is how it begins. Not with instruction, but with ignition. Not with belief, but with remembering. The words that follow are not meant to teach. They are meant to awaken. This presentation will immerse you in one of the most veiled and potent texts ever to emerge from humanity's mystical lineage, the Corpus Hermeticum. But this isn't an academic overview or some remote analysis. You're about to see why this manuscript was concealed for generations, what secrets it really holds, who was behind its creation, how it can radically transform your perception of reality, and, most importantly, how to activate the divine force already dormant within you. Yes, this is genuine. Within moments, you'll encounter wisdom that was once stripped from collective memory, banned by religious authorities, dismissed by traditional scholars, yet secretly passed on by those who understood its true potency. A roadmap to awaken a human being fully conscious of their spiritual strength, which has long been feared by the structures of control. If something deep inside you has been stirring, if your soul knows that spirituality must be more than poetic comfort, then stay with me. This journey was created to reconnect you to your essence and lead you, step by step, toward unlocking your sacred potential. And so we begin. Before institutions built temples and crafted doctrines, a certain name circulated quietly among the initiated. Not uttered carelessly, it resonated in the stone corridors of ancient Egyptian sanctuaries, within the shadowed vaults of Hellenic mysticism, and throughout clandestine texts that outlived the flames of time. Hermes, Trismegistus, thrice great, thrice initiated, thrice mastered. But who truly was this being? Hermes Trismegistus defies the idea of a single man or even a specific culture. He is a bridge, a synthesis between two ancient cosmologies. The Greek Hermes, divine communicator, guardian of crossings, lord of language and transitions, and the Egyptian Thoth or Jehudi, divine chronicler, patron of intellect, timekeeper of creation, inscriber of the celestial blueprint. From their fusion was born not just a name, but an archetype, Hermes Trismegistus, the living axis connecting the mortal and the infinite. A figure who descended bearing codes of divine intelligence, and ascended again echoing the questions of humanity. He does not mediate as a priest might, but reflects, as a mirror does, what lies possible within us when the inner God is remembered. For the sages of old, Hermes wasn't merely an enlightened teacher. He was a current, a lineage, a sentient wisdom that incarnated through ages to safeguard the path of sacred knowing. Some believed he was a remnant of Atlantis, an echo of a sunken civilization. Others believed him to be a high priest from Egypt, custodian of hidden truths, whose lifespan stretched across centuries. And there are those who call him the true hand behind the Emerald Tablet, the primal text that birthed the entire Western mystical tradition. What matters most is not the historical identity of Hermes, but the essence he symbolizes, a living remembrance that we are not merely physical beings. We carry within us a divine ember, a latent brilliance that can be reignited through gnosis, through inner stillness and the direct experience of truth. Hermes Trismegistus embodies this awakened intelligence, not the logical mind that quantifies, but the subtle knowing that senses the unseen, that reads the silences between words, that deciphers the cosmic order veiled behind appearances. This intelligence does not dissect, perceives. It hears what is unspoken. It aligns with the deeper geometry of existence where laws, frequencies, and mirrored patterns interweave. For this reason, Hermes has been venerated for thousands of years by mystics, alchemists, philosophers, and seekers of inner wisdom. He was the first master, the voice that initiated in silence, the original source behind Egypt's mysteries, the philosophical heights of Plato and Pythagoras, and the hidden teachings of esoteric Christianity. Names echo through time, Clement of Alexandria, Lactantius, the sages of Chartres, Ficino, Pico della Mirandola, Paracelsus, Giordano Bruno. Each recognized in Hermes not legend, but a vessel of timeless knowledge. They believed he foresaw humanity's fall into spiritual sleep, a time when we would forget that we are divine, mistaking flesh for essence, surface for soul. His writings were not crafted for the past but for a moment yet to come. For now. And now those words are returning, as if Hermes himself is awakening again, not in books alone, but in hearts that remember. Hermetic teachings do not speak to the intellect alone, they resonate in the spirit. We do not learn them, we recognize them. They stir something ancient inside, like a memory not learned, but reawakened. That is Hermes' real gift, to illuminate the soul's forgotten truth, to remind us the divine was never somewhere else. It slept within us, and now it stirs. At the heart of this remembrance is a sacred text, a quiet book, one that survived empires, inquisitions, and oblivion. It hides the most profound secret of the Western mystical tradition. It has waited through silence for the moment it would be needed again. That moment is now. The Corpus Hermeticum, a name whispered across centuries, misunderstood, overlooked, but never extinguished. It is not just another arcane scripture. It did not emerge from a single mind or school. It rose from a deeper silence, from a lineage that refused to vanish, hidden, guarded, awaiting the readiness of the world. And now it returns. Long after the sands buried Hermopolis, a different city rose, Constantinople, seat of the Byzantine Empire and keeper of forgotten treasures. There, in ancient vaults, a cluster of texts surfaced. 14 Greek treatises, attributed to the very same Hermes Trismegistus. And they weren't found by accident. What most don't realize is that the Corpus Hermeticum's return was not a random rediscovery. It was intimately tied to one of the most esoteric lineages of the Renaissance, the Medici family. Cosimo de' Medici, more than a wealthy patron, was a seeker, an initiate enthralled by the lost wisdom of the ancients. He quietly commissioned a search across forgotten lands for texts that might still carry the original spiritual codes. Among those who answered this hidden call was a monk named Leonardo of Pistoia. He traveled to Macedonia on a sacred mission to retrieve the writings of Hermes. And he succeeded. When the manuscripts finally reached Cosimo's hands, he acted without pause. He instructed his translator, Marsilio Ficino, to halt his current project, translating Plato himself. The urgency was that profound. The Corpus Hermeticum could not wait. Ficino sensed it too. As he began reading and translating, he saw immediately, this was no ordinary philosophy. These words were a key, encoded in symbolic language, dense with cosmic insight. They spoke not only of spirit and cosmos, but of the very architecture of reality, mind, soul, eternity, vibration. They weren't instructions for logical analysis. They were transmissions for inner transformation. The texts described the soul's fall into the material world and the path home. They mapped the universe as a mental creation, born from divine contemplation. They taught that every particle is vibration, that all form is shaped by a higher intelligence. But what was most radical, most disruptive was this, that the human being carries within the same divine spark that birthed stars in space. That we are not only part of creation, we are microcosms of it. And we can remember. This revelation was the secret ignition behind the Renaissance. Beneath the art, the architecture, the mathematical beauty, was a longing to restore enchantment. The Corpus Hermeticum wasn't just read, it was felt. It reconnected people to the sacredness of existence. Not a sacredness defined by doctrine or blind belief, but one born of direct inner knowing. Yet this very truth made the teachings dangerous. As the texts began circulating in the hidden circles of Renaissance Florence, they unsettled religious authorities. For how could they allow a book that declares God lives inside every person? How could they accept a wisdom that places self-knowledge above obedience to dogma? A vision of the world not as fixed, but as a living mental projection shaped by divine thought. So, once again, the Corpus Hermeticum was veiled. It was branded superstition, shelved as fringe philosophy, dismissed as mystical nonsense. But it never disappeared. It lived on in the secrecy of alchemists, in the breath of mystics, in the hearts of Rosicrucians and Gnostics. It survived like a seed, hidden in darkness, waiting for the right time. Now it begins to stir again, not as relic or myth, but as revelation. Because within those 14 treatises lies a technology of the soul, a map of return, a blueprint for awakening. And that journey begins with the first light, Poimandres, the opening treatise, the first gate. Here Hermes encounters not a god in the sky, but the voice of Nous, the divine mind itself. A consciousness so immense, so clear, that it speaks not as teacher to student, but as essence speaking to essence. It doesn't explain, it resonates. It doesn't inform, it transforms. These words are not crafted for the intellect. They are not puzzles to solve with reason. They are meant to enter through another door, to be received by the soul, not the mind. This is where the mystery of the Corpus Hermeticum begins to unfold. For it is not a book meant to be read in the ordinary sense. It is meant to be remembered. Each phrase, each symbol, each breath between the lines carries a resonance, like a key crafted in vibration, designed to unlock inner doors long sealed by forgetfulness. And yes, the teachings here are dangerous, not because they harm, but because they liberate. Dangerous to those who depend on a numbed humanity, to those whose power relies on the collective amnesia of the soul. These treatises dissolve the veil. They expose the illusion. They reveal that what we call the world is not the true world. It is a dream, a reflection, a veil over an infinite, divine, and subtle reality. And more than this, the corpus shows that the human is not separate from this truth. We are its reflection, its echo. Hermes begins at the beginning, at the moment of Genesis, which he says was not chaos nor randomness, but contemplation. The divine mind, the nous, gazed into itself. And through that act of reflection, creation began. The first emanation was light. Not physical light, but conscious, creative light. From this light came all things, time and motion, stars and forms, elements and life. Everything arose within and through the nous. Nothing stands apart. Nothing exists outside the one. And humanity was made in the likeness of this divine mind. But we forgot. And in that forgetting lies what Hermes calls the fall. Not a punishment, but a loss of memory. The soul, once whole, descended into the density of matter. It was drawn by sensation, entangled in time, fragmented by craving. It forgot it was more than skin and story. It began to believe it was the body, the name, the wounds, the roles. But none of that is what we truly are. The Corpus Hermeticum is a whisper that becomes a call. It invites us to remember. Not to adopt a new religion, not to follow external dogmas, but to look into a mirror. Each treatise reveals a facet of the inner pilgrimage, a path not forward but inward, a return. Hermes speaks of our ancient bond with the stars, the hidden energies we call demons, the music of planetary spheres, and the initiatory journey through life and death as mirrors of one continuum. He speaks of the soul's ascent, how, after death, it must traverse the 7 heavens, shedding at each stage the illusions that once bound it to the earth, until it becomes clear again, radiant again, light. And most daring of all, Hermes utters what few have had the courage to say. that within us lives all that we seek in the divine, that we are capable of creation, of healing, of love, of manifestation, not in imitation of God, but because we are not separate. The only veil is ignorance, and ignorance dissolves when vision awakens. For the corpus doesn't only speak of distant heavens or abstract divinity. It grounds its wisdom in the here and now, in the mind, in human consciousness. It teaches that thought precedes form, that emotion carries frequency, and that everything external begins in the unseen internal. That to transform your life you do not wait, you do not beg, you align. Reality is not chance. It is response. It's all about frequency, about resonance. That's why the Corpus Hermeticum can't be consumed like fiction or studied like a textbook. It must be received. It has to be felt. Because it doesn't speak to your rational mind. It speaks to your remembrance. When it whispers its truths, something in you hums with recognition. You don't need to analyze it. You feel it. It echoes as if it's something ancient you always knew, only forgotten. And that forgetting is not your failure. It was implanted, engineered. That's why this wisdom was hidden for so long. Because to remember who you truly are is to reclaim your power. And when you remember, you stop fitting the mold. You stop obeying. You stop apologizing for your light. Those who remember become ungovernable, not by rebellion, but by liberation. But real transformation doesn't begin at the surface. It starts in the unseen. It begins when the nous, the divine mind within, awakens. That's what the first treatise reveals. That's why Poimandres is called the first light. Because when it speaks, it does not inform, it rearranges the world. It unveils the soul's true origin. And that revelation destabilizes everything you thought was real. When this light began to stir again, many feared its return. The Corpus Hermeticum didn't simply vanish from history by accident. It was erased deliberately. Its erasure was a defense. Institutions rooted in control knew exactly what it could unleash. Because this book doesn't command, it frees. And freedom was the one thing they could not afford. In a time when spiritual power underpinned political authority, the idea that divinity was internal, not institutional, was heresy. If God could be found within, then churches lost their gatekeeping role. And Hermes taught precisely that. The sacred is not locked in a temple. The altar is your heart. The divine dwells in the core of your consciousness, silently, eternally. Such truths could not be tolerated. And so the treatises were burned, banned, branded dangerous. When the great library of Alexandria was reduced to ashes, thousands of sacred texts from Egypt, India, Persia, and Greece vanished in fire and forced forgetting. What little remained, like the Asclepius held in Latin, was carefully controlled, stripped of context, hidden behind theological filters. But not all was lost. For the initiates, the golden thread continued. In secret they copied, whispered, encoded. The wisdom endured, disguised in alchemy, in astrology, in symbols carved into stone and silence. Hermes didn't disappear, he changed his voice. He became a murmur, a breath, a presence waiting to be felt by those who could still hear. Then came the Renaissance, and with it a flicker of return. The manuscripts re-emerged like embers, glowing beneath the ash. But their impact wasn't just in their content. It was in how that content bypassed the intellect and touched the soul. The Corpus Hermeticum doesn't lay out a map. It becomes the path. It doesn't explain the way. It is the way. You don't read it, you are read by it. You don't understand it, you are transformed by it. It bypasses the mind and goes straight to the spirit. Because it doesn't call you to think. It calls you to remember. As you read, something stirs. It's not discovery, it's recognition. What the words awaken is not new knowledge, but old memory. The truth they carry has lived inside you all along. The text merely mirrors it back. It is a reflection of your soul's forgotten knowing, echoing a wisdom that once pulsed at the center of your being. And that's what sets the Corpus Hermeticum apart. It doesn't ask for belief, it invites remembrance. It doesn't present a doctrine, it offers experience. Hermes doesn't call you to obey, but to see. He tells you that you can know the divine directly. No need for rituals, no clergy, no intermediaries. The sacred path is inward. Quiet yourself. Purify your perception. Go within. The truth lives there. It always has. Hermes reveals that the soul is not born with the body. It descends from realms beyond the stars. It enters matter to experience it. But after that cycle of incarnation, the soul must return. And that return is not automatic. It requires refinement. The journey back is a path through 7 spheres, each ruled by a planetary energy, each guarded by a veil of illusion. To move through them, the soul must cast off the ego layer by layer. It is cloaked in illusions, and only by burning these cloaks, one by one, can it reach the origin again. This is what Hermes calls the rebirth into the nous, the divine mind. It is the end of fragmentation, the dissolving of the illusion of separateness. When you truly touch this teaching, something changes in you, because it reveals that what we call reality is a construct of thought, shaped by frequency. That darkness is not a force, it is just what happens when light is absent. That the chaos and fear in life are projections, not causes. They are mirrors of your disconnection, not the truth of existence. And this realization leads to the inevitable. If the world you experience originates inside you, then true change must begin within. The Corpus Hermeticum places in your hands a key that has been lost for centuries. A sacred key that unlocks the most vital insight. The world is not fixed, not solid, not separate from you. Hermes teaches that all is mind, not the limited, conditioned chatter of thought, but the pure creative intelligence that birthed existence. The nous, the divine mind, everything that is a ripple of that mind. What we call matter is condensed frequency, thought crystallized into form. Reality is mental architecture. And the most provocative truth of all? This reality responds to your internal state. The world outside you bends to the frequency within you. What you feel, believe, fear, and expect, those inner patterns shape the form that appears. You're not just in the world. The world is emanating from you. And this is not just spiritual poetry. Even modern science begins to whisper the same conclusion. Quantum physics has demonstrated that the observer alters the observed, that the very act of perception changes matter, that particles behave differently based on the consciousness interacting with them. What Hermes taught millennia ago, today begins to echo through. If matter bends in response to perception, then we must ask, what is reality? Hermes answered this long ago. Reality is consciousness, appearing at varying degrees of density. The solidity of the world is an illusion born of limited perception. You're not walking through a fixed and rigid universe. You are participating in a fluid, responsive field of frequency. A living tapestry of vibration that mirrors your mind, your feelings, your most subtle energetic tones. And the less conscious you are, the more disordered this field becomes. When you drift from the divine mind, from the nous, your world appears fragmented, heavy, and obscure. But that's not because the world changed, it's because your alignment shifted. According to the Corpus Hermeticum, the nous is pure, limitless awareness, the generative mind from which all things emerge. It is the womb of the soul, and to it the soul must one day return. But return does not happen by accident. It requires reversal. You must stop projecting illusions outward and begin to resonate with what is true. And the truth, as Hermes declares, is oneness. The world of forms, people, stars, emotions, objects, is multiplicity. But beneath this endless diversity, there is only a single current. One essence, one mind, one being. There is no true division between you and the cosmos, between the divine and the human, between the visible and the invisible. Separation is the artifact of a fragmented mind. Healing, then, is not something granted, it's something remembered. It begins not in rituals or beliefs, but in stillness, in the brave act of looking inward with sincerity. When you begin to soften the hard edges of belief, when you deconstruct the mental architecture of duality, a different kind of knowing emerges. Hermes didn't teach salvation through dogma. He taught restoration through integration, bringing back together what was splintered, reuniting spirit and flesh, self and source. And that reunion happens only when you realize that all is mind, that nothing stands outside you. Every external phenomenon is a mirror, a reflection of a vibration born within. The Corpus Hermeticum details this with precision, guiding the initiate through purification of the soul, the relinquishing of illusion, the refinement of perception. Calls not for intellectual effort, but surrender. A surrender to what has always been true within you but was obscured by noise and conditioning. Only at that depth does true practice begin. It's not about learning new concepts. It's about feeling differently, seeing differently, letting the truth vibrate in your bones. From the most mundane gesture to the cosmic vastness, everything becomes meaningful. Everything becomes a symbol. Every drop of water, every flicker of starlight, carries the imprint of the one mind. And when this perception finally cracks open within you, your entire experience begins to shift. The way you walk, the way you breathe, the way you think. And only then can you begin to understand what Hermes meant by immortality, not as the denial of death, but as the merging with what was never born and can never die. What is one, what is pure nous, has never been fractured, never defiled. It has always remained whole. But to return to that state, there is a path. Hermes did not obscure it. He encrypted it within the lines of the treatises. Each step begins with a reawakening, the remembrance of where you came from. And when that memory stirs, the entire inner cosmos begins to realign. Like an ember buried under centuries of forgetting, it catches fire again in the center of your being. Hermes called this the divine spark of nous, a fragment of the infinite mind, quietly resting inside every human soul. It does not decay, cannot be broken by time, but it lies dormant, obscured beneath the layers we mistake for identity. The body, the emotion, the name, the persona. The illusion of separation weighs upon it, silencing its pulse. Hermetic wisdom does not offer immortality as a reward, a paradise far away. It uncovers immortality as our essence. You don't earn eternity. You remember you already are it. And this remembering doesn't come through books or belief systems. It comes through frequency, through direct experience, through vibrational reintegration with the source. At the core of the Corpus Hermeticum is a spiritual jolt, an existential rupture. The first illumination is a devastating realization. All that you took to be you, the title, the pain, the accomplishments, the story, was never you. These are garments worn for a time, but they do not define your soul. To find true self is to strip those layers away, not as a concept, but as sacred recognition of what remains unchanged, untouched by time. Hermes teaches that the soul doesn't arise within the body, it descends. From the celestial spheres, it plunges into materiality, forgets as it falls. But that forgetting is not failure. It is necessary. For only through the veil can the return become meaningful. The path back becomes a fire, ignited from within. And every sign, Synchronicity, intuition, and moment of still silence is part of that awakening. A call to reunite with nous. Yet the ego resists. The part of you built to survive this dense world fears its own dissolution. It calls transformation death, when it is, in truth, a return. That's why the seeker must undergo a death while still alive. They must cross the chasm between illusion and essence. And when they stop believing the inherited inner voices, the doubts, the limitations, the judgments, they see it all for what it is, shadow play. None of it was real. And then, something profound happens. Hermes calls it the birth of the second man. A new being emerges, one who still moves through this world, still speaks, still breathes, but no longer lives by the rhythm of time. He acts not from fear, but from alignment. He doesn't chase safety or approval, for he knows now, deeply and irrevocably, that anything which can be lost is not truly him. This is immortality, not in the sense of unending physical life, but in the release from confusion with what is transient. When the initiate enters this state, they are no longer ensnared by the cycle of rebirth driven by unconscious longing. They are no longer pulled into form by matter's magnetic field. They walk, instead, by the current of eternity. Once the false self dissolves and the second self is born, life is no longer navigated by desire, it is steered by purpose. The awakened don't escape the world. They embrace it with total presence, because they see the divine in every fragment of existence. And what happens when someone lives from that state? They emit a frequency, not a philosophy. They become light not by preaching, but by simply being. They begin to radiate healing. Their presence activates others. They awaken what is dormant just by existing in alignment. They become a living conduit between what is seen and what is unseen, between the earthly and the eternal. A priest not of dogma, but of the inner sanctuary, the temple within. But make no mistake, this state is not a gift. It is a consequence. It is earned through fire, because rebirth is only the beginning. After the awakening, there is purification, a complete realignment of your being, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. This is the path the ancients called the ascent through the seven spheres. It's not metaphor, it's energy work, real alchemy. And real alchemy doesn't mean gathering hidden knowledge. It means burning away everything that obstructs the light. Every belief, every attachment, every false layer. This is where the Corpus Hermeticum becomes its most mysterious. It's not a manual. It's a ritual, encoded, silent. Every line, every gap between words carries a frequency, like a string plucked in the soul. This power isn't revealed on the first read, nor the second. Only when something inside you begins to die and be reborn does the book open itself. The structure is non-linear, disordered to the rational mind on purpose, because the mind that clings to logic is not welcome in this temple. Logic seeks patterns, rules, timelines, but the corpus wasn't built to flatter the intellect. It bypasses cognition to strike the heart of remembrance. It is, at its core, a mirror, and that is the secret of initiation. The teachings aren't hidden, but you won't recognize them until you've burned through enough illusion. Hermes never wrote a tidy, step-by-step guide. He embedded echoes, scattered clues meant to reflect your inner state. Read while identified with the outer world. The text feels opaque, fragmented, cryptic. But as you begin to unhook from the illusion of separation, clarity blooms. The same sentence, once incomprehensible, now burns with meaning. But that meaning wasn't in the text. It was in you, waiting to awaken. Because the corpus doesn't teach. It demands. It asks you to stop being a spectator in your spiritual life. It calls you to walk through the fire of unknowing, to leave behind ready-made answers and enter the realm of direct experience. cracks the shell of ego, stirs the soul, collapses certainty. And each collapse reveals a deeper truth that has always been in you. But your mind wasn't yet ready to see. It's no coincidence that mystics from Plotinus to Jung, from Ficino to Giordano Bruno, describe this book as a code that only unlocks in the furnace of inner fire. Hermetic initiation doesn't happen in temples adorned with symbols. It happens in the silence of your inner breakdown, in the sacred disintegration of what you thought was you. There comes a moment when you're reading and then you're not. The mind loosens its grip, the identity softens, and something else steps forward. A deeper presence. Silent. Holy. It reads through you. And in that moment, the Corpus Hermeticum does what it was meant to do. Not teach, but transform. That's why intellectual analysis will never unlock it. The text only reveals its true form when you begin to embody its words. It starts with a whisper. Then it pulls you through illusion. It makes you stare at the ego as the cage it has always been. And then, carefully, relentlessly, it walks you toward the place where thought grows still and being wakes up. But it hides all this in riddles. It cloaks the path like a maze that only arranges itself from the inside. Those who rush, who skim, who approach it with ego or entitlement, leave with empty hands. But those who meet it with reverence, those who let it work slowly, start to sense a rhythm beneath the words. They see the threads that once looked random begin to weave themselves into something alive. That's because the corpus is guided not by structure, but by consciousness. The same intelligence that shaped the stars moves through its pages, orchestrating your return. Many abandon the path. Few go forward. Because this isn't reading, it's dying. The Corpus Hermeticum is not literature. It is a crossing. And to cross, you must let part of you die again and again. You must surrender every false layer until only the true self remains. And it's within that surrender that the most sacred key lies hidden. A key Hermes didn't explain. He encrypted it in symbols, in vibrations that bypass words. And now, if you're still here, that key has already started to move inside you. What comes next is not more thought. It's practice. Embodied, sacred action. And if you've made it this far, it's not by accident. It's because your soul has already begun the return. At this stage, silence becomes the new teacher. Words no longer suffice. When you reach the first treatise, Poimandres, you don't encounter a figure with a voice. You meet a radiance, a field, a presence that arises within Hermes, not from outside him. Poimandres is not a god speaking. He is the divine mind itself, the original awareness choosing this moment to reveal itself. And Poimandres does not explain. He initiates. He shows the genesis of all things, not as mythology but as reality still unfolding inside you. For in Hermetic vision, the universe wasn't created once. It is continually emanating from the source vibration of the universal mind. When Poimandres speaks, he doesn't form sentences. He sends signals. He rearranges consciousness. You recognize it when clarity suddenly arises from nowhere, when tension dissolves without effort, when complexity unwinds itself into simplicity. That is Poimandres. Not logical, vibrational, not instructive, transformational. Poimandres moves not through instruction, but through resonance. It's as though, in a fleeting moment, your consciousness tunes into the very code that upholds the cosmos. And the most astonishing part? It was always within reach. Poimandres is not a figure speaking in language. He is the intuition you dismissed, the chill of truth along your spine, the luminous stillness that follows a wordless meditation. He is presence. He is the pulse behind all reorganization. But he doesn't rearrange reality through force. He works through light, subtle, unwavering, transformative. The restless mind, the storm of emotions, the cravings that distract and fragment you. These are not flaws. They are static. Disconnection noise. They fade when you come back into resonance with the greater mind. Even a moment of tuning in, even a whisper from Poimandras, awakens something essential. You remember who you are, not as a theory or ideal but as an embodied certainty. You remember what it feels like to exist in wholeness, without need, without lack, because you are part of the origin itself. And that memory, it's not soft, it's sharp. It slices through the false stories you've worn as skin. In the very first treatise, Poimandras tells Hermes, I am the mind of the all. I know what you desire, and I am with you everywhere. These aren't words for comfort. They're a code, a vibrational signature. When the personal mind synchronizes with the divine mind, it stops struggling to do and begins to allow itself to be. And in that being, manifestation flows not as effort but as alignment. Have you noticed that the things you desired most often came when you finally let go? That's the paradox Hermes points to. Wanting with attachment affirms separation. But desiring from unity lets creation pass through you effortlessly. Because all that will ever be already exists. Creation is not invention, it is unveiling. Revelation. The moment a pattern in the divine mind finds space in your awareness to become form. That's why sages across ages have whispered the same thing. The universe is mental, because all begins in the divine nous. And the nous is not out there. It is reflected within you. This fusion between your inner mind and the source is not as far as it seems. You've touched it before, when an idea appeared as if from nowhere, when peace settled for no reason, when love surged without condition, when courage rose unbidden. Those were moments when identity fell away and something deeper stepped forward. Those were Poimandras. What the Corpus Hermeticum offers is not a call to rare glimpses, but to a way of living where that state becomes natural. Not through methods, but through presence. Through purifying perception, loosening the grip of ego, and surrendering to the subtle. When that happens, the divine mind doesn't merely visit. It begins to think through you, and reality ceases to be an arena of resistance. It becomes a reflection of your expansion, your wholeness, your inner alignment. But here's the threshold. None of this activates through passive reading. It comes alive only in action. The wisdom becomes power when it is lived, not later. Now, you've walked the symbolic labyrinth of the Corpus Hermeticum. Now comes the descent into reality, not with abstractions, with direct, daily transformation. What follows will not be mystical in the traditional sense, but mystical in practice. The kind of mystery you live in each breath. This is the moment. Now begins the embodiment. Wisdom that remains unpracticed becomes a subtle ego, spiritual in name but hollow in essence. True Hermeticism only begins when you live as an initiate, not in grand ceremonies, but in the soft simplicity of your everyday rituals. The first gateway is conscious presence. In the Corpus, Hermes doesn't meditate in abstraction. He is led by Poimandras into silence, not the absence of sound, but the space where the soul begins to listen. This is not about formal practice. It begins the moment you awaken. Don't rush to noise. Don't grab your phone. Don't let your spirit drown before the day has begun. Instead, sit. Just 2 minutes. Breathe. Observe. Be with yourself before the world arrives. That stillness resets your vibrational field. As above, so below. The way you greet the morning echoes through the entire unfolding of the day. The second key is the sacred use of speech. Hermes is clear. The word creates. Every utterance is a thread in the web of your reality. Words that aren't rooted in truth distort the spirit. So speak with intention. Before you say anything, pause. Ask yourself, does this nourish? Does this uplift? Does it cleanse? If not, Let silence be your offering. In Hermetic practice, silence is not absence. It is presence refined. The third discipline is reverence for the body, not as appearance, but as a sacred instrument. The Corpus describes the body as an altar, a place where spirit becomes flesh. Your habits become rituals. What you consume, how you move, how you care, all of it echoes into your soul. Drink water with gratitude. Eat with awareness. Rest not out of exhaustion, but from devotion. Excess is noise, and noise is the enemy of inner hearing. A harmonious body allows the nous to flow unimpeded. And then there is the fourth practice, what the ancients knew as oracular reading. This is no ordinary study. The Corpus Hermeticum was never meant to be read in sequence. It's not a manual, it's an oracle, a sacred mirror. Once a week, sit in stillness. Open the book randomly. Read one paragraph. Then close the book. Don't analyze. Let the words vibrate through you. Let the symbol speak not to your logic, but to your inner knowing. This is not about interpretation, it's about resonance. The Corpus reads you as much as you read it. Set aside one day a week to sit in quiet stillness. Open the Corpus Hermeticum to any page and read just a single paragraph. Let it settle. Don't try to interpret it. Let the symbol breathe through you. This is not about analysis, it's about activation. Treat it as you would an oracle, not for forecasting events, but for awakening the ancient remembrance of who you truly are. The book becomes a mirror, not of your face, but of your soul. The fifth practice is unbroken observation. Hermes reminds us, you must become a student of your own being. Watch your patterns, how you react, what triggers you, where your emotions bloom. When anger rises, don't suppress it. Witness it. When fear arrives, don't flee. Let it teach. This is the alchemy of awareness. It is the sacred fire that does not destroy but refines. The initiate does not avoid emotion, they transform it into wisdom. Sixth, live in the space between words. The Corpus teaches, noise evaporates like smoke, but silence imprints eternity. Each day, carve out spaces of silence. Turn off the static. Walk without music. Eat without screens. Listen without rushing to respond. For it is in that deep quiet that the nous begins to whisper. And if you learn to attune to that whisper, it will reveal what no external teaching ever could. And finally, the highest practice, daily remembrance. Live with the knowing that you are already a part of the divine. The Corpus Hermeticum was never meant to send you on a search. It was meant to bring you home. Each morning, look into your own eyes and speak, I am a reflection of the divine mind. Say it for 21 days, not as affirmation but as invocation. And observe what shifts. A vibration begins to root in your being. And in that moment, the text ceases to be theory. It becomes breath. It becomes you. Because spirituality, as Hermes reminds us, is not a separate act. Life itself is the ritual. And when you live with that awareness, the sacred is no longer elsewhere. It is everywhere. This is the threshold. The veil thins. The Corpus Hermeticum is not returning now by chance. It reemerges in the hour of need, when the collective soul begins to stir, when the old systems no longer hold, when the scaffolding of control begins to crack. That is when ancient truth resurfaces, not as legend, but as code. Living code. This happened before. In 1945, in the sands of Egypt, peasants unearthed the Nag Hammadi manuscripts. Hidden gospels, Gnostic visions, revelations about the Christ within, the divine flame in each soul. Texts the religious authorities buried. But they surfaced, and with them, a door reopened. In 1995, another portal, fragments of the so-called Book of Thoth were retranslated. What had once seemed obscure was revealed as a map, a vibrational cartography of human consciousness. Attributed to the same lineage as Hermes, this book speaks of the soul as a traveler between realms, of the body as a crucible, and of the word as a bridge between matter and spirit. Time has proven it. Truth cannot be silenced forever. It waits, and when the soul is ready, it returns. The modern world, for all its brilliance and velocity, has revealed a paradox. Connection without communion, information without depth. Surrounded by data, we remain starved for meaning. And when the void becomes too loud to ignore, the soul begins to stir. The cycle returns. The ancient will turns once more. Forgotten scrolls long buried in silence begin to hum again, not as relics, but as revelations. They sound like prophecy because they were always written for now. Hermes was not speaking to his contemporaries. He was speaking to you, to a time when the human being, tired of false stories and spiritual sedation, would begin to remember. That time is no longer arriving. It has arrived. That is why the Corpus Hermeticum is surfacing again. That is why the name Hermes echoes in hushed tones, in dreams, in sudden realizations. Because there are those who no longer feel at home in the illusions of this world. They feel the dissonance. They feel the pull. The call isn't loud, but it's relentless. It rises from within, a quiet remembrance shaking off the dust of lifetimes. You knew this. You've always known. You just forgot. But now that truth has touched you, you cannot unsee it. The seal is broken. The forbidden flame has returned. And it has not returned to be worshipped. It has returned to be lived. Not through dogma, but through embodiment. This age demands transformation, not spectatorship. The reader must become the alchemist. The awakened must become the architect. What's at stake now is far more than personal growth. It is the architecture of reality itself. If these words find you now, it is not random. Perhaps you've sensed it, that you're not here to replicate the old patterns but to reweave the thread between matter and spirit. That within you rests the same creative pulse that formed the galaxies. Maybe you haven't fully seen it yet, but something inside you already shifted. And it wasn't the text. It wasn't even the voice. It was the silent activation of something ancient moving through your nervous system. A knowing that goes deeper than thought. A truth that refuses to remain hidden. The Corpus Hermeticum is not meant to be understood. It is meant to vibrate. It doesn't reach for your logic. It finds the buried part of you that already knows but was drowned in noise, in the scripts, the roles, the rules about who you should be. And maybe while hearing it, your breath caught, your chest tightened, a subtle ache opened. That's not coincidence. That's awakening. The soul stretching inside its cocoon of forgetfulness. Because when you engage this text with presence, you are not reading information. You are activating frequency. These frequencies do not knock politely. They break through. They rearrange. They peel away the false layers, the programmed beliefs, the habitual masks. They do not negotiate. They enter. And if you let them, they transmute. This is not just a book. It is a voltage, a current, a whisper of fire. You may resist. You may call it abstract. You may say it's just philosophy. But something in you will say otherwise, because it doesn't matter how many books you've read. This one isn't about accumulation. It is about ignition. It shows you a mirror you didn't know you carried. And in that mirror, you do not see the tired reflection of daily survival. You see a flash of what's always been real. The spark, the undying flame, the you that never broke from source. That is why the Corpus Hermeticum changes you, even if you don't understand it yet. Because it plants seeds. It waters silence. And slowly, it breaks open the concrete of conditioning where nothing sacred could grow. And in that cleared space, remembrance rises. a living memory that you are vast, that you are not bound by fate, that you house a sacred power waiting to be claimed, and that the illusion of this world only seems real because you forgot where to look. And the truth is not on the page. It's in what awakens when you touch it. It's not what the pages say. It's what they stir, what they shake loose inside you. But for that to happen, truly you must allow it. Let yourself be pierced, unraveled, undone. That's the courage the path demands. Because once the truth touches you, illusion no longer fits. You can't go back to numbness, to noise, to pretending. The comfort of the old world begins to feel like a costume too tight for your skin. And yes, it may be disorienting, but it is also the beginning of real freedom. Because in that moment of unraveling, you discover you don't need to become anything. You only need to remember, and that remembrance begins in silence, in the quiet vibration that awakened in you while you were listening, while the ancient fire slowly reignited in your chest. Now that fire is lit. Now one final step remains. Because the last teaching of the Corpus Hermeticum is not another truth to decode. It is a question, a choice, one that no one else can make for you. Will you remain a seeker, or will you become what you've always been? If you've come this far, something inside you already knows the answer. Maybe you don't fully see it yet, but the shift has begun. The change is alive in you. Simply allowing these words to move through you has already initiated something old, something vast and essential. The Corpus Hermeticum was never meant to be read like a novel, never meant to be shelved as knowledge. It was crafted as a mirror of the cosmos. And the cosmos has no ending. It breathes in cycles. It reveals in spirals. Every ending is another beginning. And now that this sacred current has flowed into your life, it won't leave. It doesn't shout. It doesn't push. It stays quietly, like a seed buried in your soul, waiting for the right moment to bloom. This text does not ask for your intellect. It doesn't seek interpretation. It asks to be lived, to be embodied. It wants you to feel, with every cell of your being, that you have never been separate, that every moment in your life, every fall, every breath, every yearning, has been part of the same thread, a golden line winding back to origin, back to the center, back to what you are when all else is stripped away, beyond names, beyond roles, beyond the narrative the world gave you. This is the real return, and it begins now. Now, with all that has been awakened in you, only one thing remains. Step through the unseen threshold, from who you were into what now begins to emerge. No ceremony is required, no chant or flame, just your presence. Breathe with intention, sit with the stillness. Let the words that stirred something in you rise again, not as thoughts to grasp, but as vibrations moving through your field. Reread them, let them pass through you like music, not for understanding, but for resonance. That is how alchemy works, quietly, profoundly, beyond logic. The Corpus Hermeticum doesn't offer conclusions. It doesn't hand you answers, because the answers were never the point. The point was to remember that the right questions already live inside your being. And when you stop reaching outward, everything begins to realign. The veil becomes thinner, the noise softens, and in that opening, the divine presence that has waited within you begins to stir and take form. In the days to come, you may notice small shifts. The world may start to appear different, more symbolic, more alive. You may crave silence. You may hunger for truth. That is the echo of the call growing louder. And as you listen, the weight of the old world loosens. The new rises quietly from within. This is not a farewell. It is a remembering. And remembering doesn't end, it deepens. Now that you carry this frequency, the universe will meet you in a new way. The gate has opened, and it does not close. If you've arrived at this point, say it aloud or write it down. The divine in me has awakened. Let this be more than a phrase. Let it be a seal, a subtle vibrational signature that says, I have begun to remember. If these words have stirred something in you, if the fire has caught even the faintest edge of your soul, know that your presence makes a difference. You are not alone. This remembrance is happening in many, and your light supports the unfolding of the whole. There is more. The journey continues. Path has been prepared, and just ahead, another door is opening. It's already calling. Step through. I'll meet you there.